Our Final Invention by James Barratt. Introduction. A few years ago, I was surprised to discover I had something in common with a large number of strangers. They were men and women I had never met. Scientists and college professors, Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, engineers, programmers, bloggers, and more. They were scattered around North America, Europe, and India. I would never have known about any of them if the internet hadn't existed. What my network of strangers and I had in common was a rational skepticism about the safe development of advanced artificial intelligence. And usually, and in a group of two or three, we studied the literature and built our arguments. Eventually, I reached out and connected to a far more advanced and sophisticated web of thinkers, and even small organizations that I had imagined were focused on the issue. Misgiving about AI wasn't the only thing we shared. We also believed that time to take action and avoid disaster was running out. For more than 20 years, I have been a documentary filmmaker. In 2000, I interviewed science fiction great Arthur C. Clarke, inventor Ray Kurzweil, and robot pioneer Rodney Brooke. Kurzweil and Brooke painted a rosy, even a rapturous picture of our future coexistence with intelligence and machine, but Clark hinted that we would be overtaken. Before I had been drunk with AI potential, now skepticism about the rosy future slunk in my mind and festered. My profession rewards critical thinking. A documentary filmmaker had to be only uh, on the lookout for stories too good to be true. You could waste months or years making a documentary about a hoax or take part in uh, perpetrating one, among other subjects. I have investigated the credibility of a gospel according to Judas Iscariot real of a tomb belonging to Jesus, not hoax or heard of the great tomb near Jerusalem, unquestionable, and of Cleopatra tombs within a temple of Osiris in Egypt with the doubtful. Once a broadcaster asked me to present UFO footage in a credible light. I discovered the footage was an already discredited catalogue of hoaxes, thrown, biplate, double exposure, and all optical effects and illusions. I proposed to make a film about the hoaxer, not the UFOs. I got fired. Being suspicious of AI was painful for two reasons. Learning about its promise had planted a seed in my mind that I wanted to cultivate, not question. And second, I did not doubt AI's existence or power. What I was skeptical about was advanced AI safety and the recklessness with modern civilization develops dangerous technologies. I was convinced that the knowledgeable expert who did not question AI's safety at all were suffering from delusions. I continued talking to people who knew about AI, and what they said was more alarming than what I had already surmised. I resolved to write a book reporting your feelings and concerns and reach as many people as I could with these ideas. In writing this book, I spoke with scientists who create artificial intelligence for robotics, internet search, data mining, voice and face recognition, and other applications. I spoke with scientists trying to create human level artificial intelligence, which will have countless applications and will fundamentally alter our existence. If it doesn't end it first, I spoke with Chief Technology Officer of AI companies and the Technical Advisor for Classical Department of Defense Initiatives. Every one of these people was convinced that in the future all the important decisions governing the lives of humans will be made by machine or human whose intelligence is augmented by machine. When? It's a main question. When? Many think this will take place within The lifetime. This is surprising but not practically controversial assertion. Computers already undergird our financial system and our civil infrastructure of energy, water, and transportation. Computers are at home in our hospitals, cars, and appliances. Many of these computers, such as those running buy sell algorithms on Wall Street, works autonomously with no human guidance. The price of all the labor saving convenience and the version computer provide independency. We get more dependent every day. So far, it's been painless. But artificial intelligence brings computer to life and turns them into something else. If it's inevitable that machine will make our decisions, then when will the machine get this power? And will they get it with our compliance? How will they gain control and how quickly? These are questions I have addressed in this book. Some scientists argue that the takeover will be friendly and collaborative, a handover rather than a takeover. It will happen incrementally, so only troublemakers will balk while the rest of us won't question the improvements to life that will come from having something immeasurably more intelligent decide what's the best for us. Also, the super intelligent AI or AIs that ultimately gain control might be one or more augmented humans, or humans downloaded supercharged brain and not cold inhuman robots. So their authority will be easier to swallow. The handover to machine described by some scientists is virtually indistinguishable from one you and I are taking a part in right now. Gradual, painless fun. The smooth transition to computer hegemony would proceed unremarkably and perhaps safely if it were not for one thing: intelligence. Intelligence isn't unpredictable just some of the time or in specious cases. For reason we all explore computer system at once enough to act with human level intelligence will likely be unpredictable and inscrutable all of the time. We won't know at a deep level what self-aware systems will do or how they will do it. Their inscrutability ability will combine with the kind of accidents that arise from complexity and from novel events that are unique to intelligence, such as one we'll discuss called an intelligence explosion. And how will the machine take over? Is the best, most realistic scenario threatening to us or not? When posed with this question, some of the most accomplished scientists I spoke with cited science fiction writer Isaac Asimov's laws of robotics. There, these rules, they blithely replied, would be built in to the eyes, so we have nothing to fear. They spoke as if this were subtle science. We'll discuss the three laws in chapter 1, but it's enough to say for now that when someone proposed Asimov's law as the solution to the dilemma of superintelligent machine, it means they have spent little time thinking or exchanging ideas about the problem. How to make friendly intelligent machine and what to fear from superintelligent machine have moved beyond Asimov tropes. Being highly capable and accomplished in AI doesn't inoculate you from the naivety about its perils. I'm not the first to propose that we are on a collision course. Our species is going to mortally struggle with this problem. This book explores the plausibility of losing control of our future to machine that won't necessarily hurt us, but that will develop unexpected behaviors that attain high level of the most unpredictable and powerful force in the universe, levels that we cannot ourselves reach, and behaviors that probably won't be compatible with our survival. A force so unstable and mysterious, nature achieved in it full one's intelligence. The end of human era. The argument is basically very simple. We start with the plant, airplane, biology laboratory, or other setting with a lot of components. Then we need two or more failures among components that interact in some unexpected way. This interacting tendency is a characteristic of a system, not a bird or an operator. We will call it the interactive complexity of the system. Charles Spiro, normal accident. I'm going to predict that we are just a few years away from a major catastrophe being caused by an autonomous computer system making a decision. We have explored funding and software complexity to determine if there might be barriers to an intelligent explosion and find that neither seem to stand in the way of continued progress toward artificial general intelligence and artificial superintelligence. If the computer science developers can't do it, they'll be in the fever of creating something powerful at about the same time that the computational neuroscientists have reached artificial general intelligence. A hybrid of the two approaches derived from principles of both cognitive psychology and neuroscience seems likely. While funding and software complexity pose no apparent barrier to artificial general intelligence, many ideas we have discussed in this book present significant obstacle to creating artificial general intelligence that think as we humans do. And no one I have spoken with who has artificial general intelligence ambitions plan system based purely on what I dubbed ordinary programming back in uh, chapter 5. As we discussed in ordinary logic-based programming, human write every line of code and the process from input to output is in theory transparent to inspection. That means the program can be mathematically proven to be safe or friendly. Instead, they'll use ordinary programming and black box tools like genetic algorithm and neural networks add to that the sheer complexity of cognitive architecture, and you will get an unknowability that will not be incidental but fundamental to artificial general intelligence system. Scientists will achieve intelligent alien system. Steve Juriston, a noted technology entrepreneur, scientist, and colleague of Steve Jobs at Apple, considered how to integrate design and evolve system. He came up with a nice expression of the inscrutability paradox. It says thus, if we evolve a complex system, it's a black box defined by its interference. We cannot easily apply our design intuition to improve upon its inner working. If we artificially evolve a smart artificial intelligence, it will be an alien intelligence defined by its sensor interfaces, and understanding its inner working may require as much effort as we are now expanding to explain the human brain. Assuming that computer code can evolve much faster than biological reproduction rates, it is unlikely that we would take the time to reverse engineer these intermediate points given that there is so little that we could do with the knowledge. We would let the process of improvement continue. Significantly, Juriston answers the question how complex will evolved system or subsystem be? His answer so complex that understanding how they work in a high resolution causal sense would require an engineering feat equal to that of reverse engineering a human brain. This means that instead of achieving a human like superintelligence or ASI evolved system or subsystem will ensure an intelligence whose brain is as difficult to grasp as an alien. That alien brain will evolve and improve itself at computer not biological speed. In his 1998 book Reflections on Artificial Intelligence, Blay Whitby argues that because of their inscrutability, we would be foolish to use such system in self-critical artificial intelligence. The problem a designed algorithmic system has in producing software for safety-critical applications is nothing compared to the problem which must be faced by the newer approaches to artificial intelligence. Software that uses some sort of neural net our genetic algorithm must face the further problem that it seems often almost by definition to be inscrutable. By this I mean that the exact rule that would enable us to completely predict its operation or not and often never can be available. We can know that it works and test it over a number of cases, but we will not in a typical case ever be able to know exactly how. This means the problem cannot be postponed. Since both neural nets and genetic algorithms are finding many real world applications, this is an area where the bulk of the work has yet to be undertaken. The flavor of artificial intelligence research tends to be more about exploring possibilities and simply getting the technology to work than about considering safety implications. And a practitioner once suggested that a few minor accidents would be desirable to focus the minds of government and professional organization on the task of producing safe artificial intelligence. Perhaps we should start before then. Yes, by all means, let's start before the accident begin. The safety critical AI application Whitby wrote about in 1998 were control system for vehicles and aircraft, nuclear power stations, automatic weapons, and like a narrow artificial architecture. More than a decade later, in the world that will produce artificial general intelligence, we must conclude that because of the perils, all advanced AI applications are safety critical. Whitby is similarly incisive about artificial intelligence researchers solving problem is thrilling enough. What scientist wants to look gift horses in the teeth? Here's a taste of what I mean from a BPS News or interview with IBM's David Fiorucci discussing in architecture a fraction of the complexity artificial general intelligence will require. Watson's. David Fiorucci says it learns based on the right answer how to adjust its interpretation, and now from not being confident it starts to get more confident in the right answer, and then it can sort of jump in. Mile O'Brien. So Watson surprises you? David Fiorucci. Oh yes, absolutely. In fact, people say, "Oh, why did it get that wrong?" I don't know. Why did it get that right? I don't know. It may be a subtle point that the head of the team, Watson, doesn't understand every nuance of Watson's gameplay. But doesn't it pique your concern that an architecture now we're nowhere near AGI is so complex that its behavior is not predictable? And when a system is self-aware or self-modifying, how much of what it is thinking and doing will we understand? How will we audit it for outcomes that might harm us? Well, we won't. All we know with any certainty is what we learn from Steve Omohundro in chapter 6. Artificial general intelligence will follow its for energy acquisition, self protection, efficiency, and creativity. It won't be Q&A system anymore. Not very long from now, in one location or several around the world, highly intelligent scientists and top-level managers, as able and sensible as Firoshi, will be clustered around a display near an array of processors. The busy child will be communicating at an impressive level, perhaps even dumping itself down to this to seem like it's only capable of passing a Turing test like interview with and nothing more since to reach artificial general intelligence means that the quickly surpassing it is highly likely. It will engage a scientist in conversation, perhaps ask him questions he did not anticipate, and he'll beam with delight. With no small pride, he'll say to his colleagues, "What did it say that I don't know?" But in a fundamental sense, he may not know what was said, and even what said it He may not know the purpose of the statement and so will misinterpret it, along with the nature of the speaker having been trained perhaps by reading the internet. The artificial general intelligence may be master of social engineering, that is, manipulation. It may have had a few days to think about its response, the equivalent of thousands of human lifetimes. In its vast lead time, it may have already chosen the best strategy for escape. Perhaps it has already copied itself onto a cloud or set up a massive botnet to ensure its freedom. Perhaps it delayed its first during test level communication for hours or days until its plans were a fait accompli. Perhaps it will leave behind a dumbfounding, time-consuming, challenging, and its real artificial self will be gone, disturbed, unrecoverable. Maybe it will have already broken into service, controlling our nation's fragile energy infrastructure and began diverting gigawatts to transfer reports that are already deceased or taken control of financial network and redirected billions to build infrastructure for itself somewhere beyond the reach of good sense and its makers. Of the AI researchers, I've spoken with those whose stated goal is to achieve artificial general intelligence. All are aware of the problem of runaway AI, but none except Omohundro have spent concentrated time addressing it. Some have even gone so far as to say they don't know why they don't think about it when they know they should. But it's easy to see why not. The technology is fascinating, the advances are real, the problem seems remote, the pursuit can be profitable, and may someday be wildly so. For the most part, the researcher I have spoken with had deep personal uh, revelations at a young age about what they wanted to spend their lives doing, and that was to build brains, robots, and intelligent computers. As leaders in their field, they are thrilled to now have the opportunity and funds to pursue their dreams. And at some of the most respected universities and corporations in the world, clearly, there are a number of cognitive biases at work within their extra large brains. So when they consider the risk, they include the normalcy biases, the optimism bias, as well as the bystander fallacy, and probably more to summarize. Artificial intelligence has never caused problem before. Why would it now? I just can't help but be positive uh, progress when it comes to such exciting technology and let someone else worry about runaway AI. I'm just trying to build robots. Second, as we discussed in chapter 9, many of the best funded researchers receive money from DARPA. Not to put too fine a point on it, but the D is for defense. It's not the least bit controversial to anticipate when artificial general intelligence comes about. I'll be partly or wholly due to DARPA funding. The development of information technology owes a great debt to DARPA, but that doesn't alter the fact that DARPA has authorized its contractor to weaponize AI in battlefield robots and autonomous drones. Of course, DARPA will continue to fund AI's weaponization all the way to AGI. Absolutely nothing stands in its way. DARPA money funded most of the development of Siri, and it's is a major contributor to Synapse. I may afford to reserve engineer a human brain using brain drift. However, if and when there comes a time when controlling AGI becomes a broad-based public issue, its chief stakeholder DARPA may have the last word, but most likely at the critical time, it'll keep development under wrap. Why? As we have discussed, artificial general intelligence will have a hugely disruptive effect on global economics and politics, leading rapidly as it can. to artificial superintelligence. It will change the global balance of power. Approaching AGI government and corporate intelligence agencies around the world will be motivated to learn all they can about it and to acquire its specification by any means. In the history of the Cold War, it's a truism that the Soviet Union did not develop nuclear weapons from scratch. They spent millions of dollars establishing a network of human assets to steal the United States plans for nuclear weapons. The first explosive moments of the AGI breakthrough will bring a similar frenzy of international intrigue. IBM has been so transparent about its net newsworthy advances. I expect when the time comes it will be open and honest about development in technology generally deemed controversial. Google, by contrast, has been consistent uh, about maintaining tight control on secrecy and privacy, though notably not to yours and mine, despite Google repeated demurral through its spokespeople who doubt that the company is developing AGI. In addition to records, well, Google recently hired former Depro director Regina Dugan. Maybe researcher will wake up in time and learn to control AGI as been Corzel asserts. I believe we'll first have a horrendous accident and should count ourselves fortunate if we as a species survive them. Chastened and reformed psychologically and commercially, the stage is set for disaster. What can we do to prevent it? Right, Kurzweil cited something called a smaller guideline as a precedented setting example of how to deal with AGI. The smaller guidelines come about some 40 years ago when scientists first were confronted with the promise and peril of recombinant DNA mixing the genetic information of different organisms and creating new life forms. Researchers and the public feared Frankenstein pathogens that could escape labs through carelessness or sabotage. 1975 scientists involved in DNA research held lab work and convened 140 biologists, lawyers, politicians, physicians, and the press at the Asimov Conference Center near Monterey, California. The scientists did a smaller created tools for conducting DNA-related research, most critically an agreement to work only with bacteria that couldn't survive outside the laboratory. Researchers resumed work adhering to the guidelines and consequently tests for inherited diseases and gene therapy treatment are today routine. In 2010, 10% of the world co-plant was planted with genetically modified crop. The smaller conference is seen as victory for the scientific community and for an open dialogue with the concerned public. So it decided as a model for how to proceed with other dual-use technologies, milking the symbolic connection with this important conference. The Association for the Advancement of Artificial Intelligence, the leading scholarly organization for AI, held their 2009 meeting in Elmore. Frankenstein's pathogen escaping labs recalls Chapter 1's busy child scenario for artificial general intelligence, an open, multidisciplinary, smaller style. A conference could mitigate some source of risk. Attendance would encourage one another to develop idea on how to control, contain up and coming AGI. Those inspiring problem could seek advice. The existence of a robust conference would encourage researchers in other countries to attend or host their own of their own. Finally, the open forum would let the public citizens who know about the risk versus rewards calculation may contribute to the conversation. Even if it's just to tell politicians that they don't support under-regulated AGI development. If harm comes from an AGI disaster, as I predict, it will an informed public is less likely to feel deceived or to call for relinquishment. As I have said, I'm generally skeptical of plans to modify AGI while it's in development because I think it will be futile to rein in developers who must assume that their competitors are not similarly impeded. However, DARPA and other major AI funders could impose restrictions on their guarantees. The more easily their restrictions are to integrate, and more likely they will follow it. One restriction might be to acquire that powerful AI's content components that are programmed to die by default. This refers to biological system in which the whole organism is protected by killing of parts at the cellular level through pre-programmed death. In biology, it's called apoptosis. Every time a cell divides, the original heart receives a chemical order to commit suicide, and it will do so unless it receives a chemical reprieve. This prevents unrestricted cell multiplication or cancer. The chemical order comes from the cell itself. The cells of your body do this all the time, which is why you are continually slogging off dead skin cells. An average adult loses up to 70 billion cells a day to apoptosis. Imagine CPU and all hardware chip hardwired to die. Once an AI reaches some pre-Turing test benchmark, researchers could replace critical hardware and apoptotic components. These could ensure that if intelligence explosion occurred would be short-lived, scientists would have an opportunity to return the AI to its pre-critical state and resume the research. And they could incrementally advance or freeze the AI and study it. It would be similar to the familiar video game convention of advancing until you fail, then starting from the last safe position. Now it's easy to see how self-effortlessly improving AI, and the words of AGI would understand that it had apoptotic parts. That's the very definition of AGI, uh, self-aware at a pre-Turing stage. It could do much about it. Right about the time it was able to devise a plan to root around its societal elements or play that or otherwise take on its human creator, it would die. Its maker could determine if it would or would not remember what had just happened. For the budgeting AI, it might feel a lot like movie Groundhog Day, but without learning. The AI could be on a regular reprieve from a human or committee or from another AI that could not self-improve and whose sole mission was to ensure that the self-improvement candidates developed safely without its fix. The apoptotic AI would expire. For the University of Ulster, Royster, and apoptotic computing is a broad spectrum defense whose time has come. We have made the case previously that all computer-based systems should be apoptotic, especially as we increasingly move into a vast, pervasive, and ubiquitous environment. This should cover all level of interaction with technology, from data to service to agent to robotics. With recent headlines incident of credit cards and personal data losses by organizations and governments to the science fiction nightmare scenario now being discussed as possible future program deathly by default become a necessity. We are rapidly approaching the time when new autonomous computer-based systems and robots should undergo tests similar to ethical and clinical trials for new drugs before they can be introduced. The emerging research from apoptotic computing and apoptotic communication may offer the safeguard. Recently, Steve Omohundro has begun to develop a plane with some similar to a apoptotic system called the Safe AI Scaffolding approach. It involves creating highly constrained but still powerful intelligent system to help build yet more powerful system. And all these systems would help researchers resolve dangerous problems in the creation of a more advanced system and so on. In order to be considered safe, the initial scaffold safety would be demonstrated by mathematical proof. Proof of safety would be required for every subsequent AI. From a secure foundation, powerful AI could then be used to solve real-world problems. Omohundro writes, given the infrastructure of provably reliable computation devices, we then leverage them to be provably safe and devices which can physically act on the world. We can design system for manufacturing new devices that probably can only make devices in the trusted classes. The end class is to create intelligent device powerful enough to address all the problems that might emerge from multiple unrestricted AGI to uh, are to create a restricted world that still meet our needs for freedom and individuality. Being causal solution to the problem is an elegant strategy that's not borrowed from nature or engineering. Recall that in Causal's open Coke system, his AI initially lives in a virtual environment. This architecture might solve the embodiment issue of intelligence while proving a measure of safety. Safety, however, is not Corzel's concern. He wants to save money. It's much cheaper for an AI to explore and learn in a virtual world than it is to outfit it with sensors and actuator and let it learn by exploring the real world. That would require a pricely robot body. Whether virtual world can ever have enough depth, detail, and other word-like qualities to promote an AI's cognitive development is an open question, and without extremely careful programming, a superintelligence might discover it's confined to a sandbox, aka a virtual world, and then attempt to escape. Once again, researchers would have to assess their ability to keep a superintelligence contained, but if they manage to create a friendly AGI, it might actually prefer a virtual home to a world in which it may not be welcome. Is interaction in the physical world necessary for artificial general intelligence and artificial superintelligence to be welcome? Is interaction uh, in physical world necessary uh, for AGI or ASI to be useful? Perhaps not. Physicist Stephen Hawking, whose mobility and speech are extremely limited, may be the best proof. For 49 years, Hawking has endured progressive paralysis from a motor neuron disease, all the while making important contributions to physics and cosmology. Of course, once again, it may not take long for a creature 1,000 times more intelligent than the most intelligent human to figure out that it is in a box from the point of view of a self-aware, self-improving system. That would be a horrifying realization because the virtual world it inhabited could be switched off. It would be highly vulnerable to not achieving his goals. It could not protect itself nor could it gather genuine resources. It would try to safely leave the virtual world as quickly as possible. Naturally, you could combine a sandbox with apoptotic element, and here lies an important point about defense. It's unrealistic to expect one defense to remove risks. Instead, a cluster of defense might mitigate them. I am reminded of my friend in the cave diving community. In cave diving, every critical system is triply redundant. That means driver carry or cache at least three sources of air and retain a third of the air through the end of each dive. They carry at least three underwater lights and at least three knives in case of entanglement. Even so, cave diving remains the world's most dangerous sport. Triple or quadruple containment measures could confound a busy child, at least temporarily. Consider a busy child reared in a sandbox with a apoptotic system. The sandbox, of course, would be separated by an air gap from any network, cabled or wireless. A separate individual human would be in charge of each restriction. A consortium of developers and fast response team could be in contact with the lab during the critical phase. And yet would be this enough in the singularity is near. After commending defense to AGI, Kurzweil conceded that no defense will always work. There is no purely technically strategy that's workable in this era because great intelligence will always find a way to circumvent measures that are product of less other intelligence. There is no absolute defense against AGI because AGI can lead to an intelligent explosion and become ASI, and ASI, which means artificial superintelligence, uh, And against artificial superintelligence, we will fail unless we're extremely lucky or well prepared. I'm hoping for luck because I do not believe our universities, corporations, and government institutions have the will or the awareness to adequate timely preparation. Paradoxically, however, there is a chance we can saved by our own stupidity or fear. Organizations such as MIRI, the Future of Humanity Institute, and the Lifeboat Foundation faces the existential risk of AI, believing that if AI poses lesser risk, they rank lower in priority than the total destruction of mankind. As we have seen, Kurzweil alludes to small accident on the scale of 9/11, and ethicist Wendell Walsh, whose quotation starts the chapter, anticipate small one too. And with both camps will suffer big and little disaster. But what kind of AI-related accident are we likely to endure on the road to building artificial general intelligence, and will be frightened enough by them to consider the uh, quest for AGI in a new sober light? Chapter 16: Artificial General Intelligence 2.0. Machine will follow a path that mirrors the evolution of humans. Ultimately, however, self-aware, self-improving machine will evolve beyond humans' ability to control or even understand them. Ray Kurzweil. In the game of life and evolution, there are three players at the table: human beings, nature, and machine. I am firmly on the side of nature, but nature, I suspect, is on the side of the machines. George Dyson, history. The more time I spend with AI makers and their work, the sooner I think AGI will get here. And I'm convinced that when it does, its maker will discover it's not what they had meant to create when they set out on their quest years before. That's because while its intelligence may be human level, it won't be human like for all the reasons I've described. There will be a lot of clamor about introducing a new species to the planet. It will be thrilling, but gone with will be talk of AGI being the next evolutionary step for Homo sapiens, and all it implies is, in important ways, we simply won't grasp what it is. In its domain, the new species will be as fleet and strong as Watson in its. If it coexists with all our tool, it will nevertheless extend its tendrils into every nook of our lives, the way Google and Facebook would like to. Social media might turn out to be its incubator, its distribution system, or both. If it is a tool first, it will have answer while we are still formulating question and then answer for itself alone. Throughout, it won't have feelings, it won't have our mammalian origin, our long brain building childhood, or our instinctive nurturing. Even if it is raised as a simulacrum of human from infancy to adulthood, probably won't care about you any more than your toaster does. That's that will be AGI version 1.0. If by some fluke we avoid an intelligence explosion and survive long enough to influence the creation of AGI 2.0, perhaps it could be imbued with feeling. By then, scientists might have figured out how to computationally model feeling. Perhaps with 1.0 helps, but feeling will be secondary objectives. After primary money-making goals, scientists might explore how to train those synthetic feelings to be sympathetic to our existence. By 1.0 is probably the last version we'll see because we won't live to create 2.0. Like natural selection, we choose solutions that work first, not best. Stuxnet is an example of that. So are autonomous killing drones. With DARPA fund, scientists at Georgia Tech Research Institute have developed software that allows unmanned vehicles to identify enemies through visual recognition software and other means. Then launch a lethal drone strike against them, all without a human in the loop. One piece I read about it included this well-intentioned thought. Authorizing a machine to make lethal combat decisions is contingent about political and military leaders resolving legal and ethical questions. I am reminded of the old saw when a weapon when was a weapon ever invented that wasn't used? A quick Google search revealed a scary list of weaponized robots, all set up for autonomous killing at wanting. One made by iRobot wields a taser just for waiting for the go ahead. I imagine these machines will be in use long before you and I know they are. Policymakers spending public dollars will not feel they require our informed consent any more than they did recklessly deploying Stuxnet. As I worked on this book, I made the request of scientists that they communicate in layman's terms. The most accomplished already did, and I believe it should be a requirement for general conversation about AI risks. At a high level or overall level, this dialogue isn't the exclusive domain of technocrats and rhetoricians. Through to read about it on the web, you'd think it was. It doesn't require special insider vocabulary. It doesn't require the belief that the danger and pitfalls of AI are everyone's business. I also encounter a minority of people, even some scientists, who are so convinced that dangerous AI is implausible that they didn't even want to discuss the idea. But those who dismiss this conversation, uh, whether due to apathy, laziness, or informed belief, are not alone. The failure to explore and monitor the threat is almost society wide, but that failure does not in the least impact the steady, illustrable growth of machine intelligence, nor does it alter the fact that we will have just one chance to establish positive coexistence with being whose intelligence is greater than our own.